I think it is still locked up in the bar on the top. It says locked in parentheses.
I'll unlock it.
I can't see that.
It is unlocked, or it was locked, yeah.
Okay, sorry. And we're live on YouTube.
Oh,
We have our applicant, so we can begin.
Great, thank you. All right, welcome everyone to the afternoon session of the April 12th, 2022 public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We will begin this afternoon with public hearing item number 5. This meeting is being held via Zoom, and if you'd like to testify on any items, please join the Zoom meeting to do so. And if you would just like to watch the proceedings, you may do so at our YouTube channel where we are live streaming. And with that, I will turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to take us through the rest of the agenda today.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And I would also like to take the opportunity to note that we did have a last minute layover. So what was scheduled as the last item of the day is no longer being presented today. That was item 7, LPC 22-07348, 38 East 75th Street. So we will not be hearing that today. So we'll now move to item 5. Public hearing item number 5 is LPC 22-06483. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1123, Lot 10, 51 West 7th Street in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. This is a Renaissance revival style row house with Romanesque revival elements designed by Gilbert A. Schellinger and built in 1890 to 91. And the application is to alter the front facade and areaway, install ironwork, and modify window openings.
Hey, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Jennifer, you now have control of the screen. You can just advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Okay, thanks, Abby. Hi, I'm Jennifer McKenzie. I'm with Lang Architecture. Okay, so can everybody, I assume everything is legible and that I'm heard, so I'll just move forward. So let's see. There we go. So as Corey mentioned, our project is a townhouse on the Upper West Side on West 51st. Sorry, on West 70th. It's a Renaissance revival from the parlor level up and has some Romanesque revival elements down at the garden level. We will just be talking about a couple items today. So just some changes to the parlor level, former entry, and the openings down at the garden level, plus one of the openings at the rear. So here's the map of our block. As you can see, the sort of donut is fully enclosed. Here we are at 51. So, you know, there's really no area of the public right of way from which you can see any of the rear modifications we'll be discussing. Here you can kind of see that in axon. So fully enclosed at the rear. So here are the 1940s tax photos of our property, 51 over here. So you can see prior to 1940, the building had been converted to multifamily at some point, and the stoop had been removed. So this building was originally built as a row of 5 that were in an AB pattern. So over here at the second image, you can see here's us, 51 without the stoop, and then 47 would have been our, you know, original design, something very similar to this. There's something I want to draw attention to elsewhere on the block. Most of the actually all of the townhouses on our block that have had the stoop removed and now have guard level entry, they have a really consistent window pattern at the parlor level. So ours, you know, historically had a casement condition here, but that's not something that's seen on the block today. So here are, you know, more recent photos from Google Street View. Here's us, 51. So over here at 43, this is actually part of our original row. And you can see here, here's an example of, that consistent window opening condition at the parlor level. Elsewhere on the block, the door enfraimment from the former parlor level entry has actually been removed or modified. In most cases, it's really been stripped away. We still have all of that detailing, so we're proposing keeping all of the enfraimment stonework and just modifying the opening. So here are the existing conditions. So this is the area in question here. And then you can see too that some of the garden level, the area of the previous stoop has been, sort of reduced to not much of anything. And then our proposal introduces some of the elements from the parlor level and brings them down to the new garden level entry. And then later in the presentation, we will talk about this rear window at the parlor level. So here's just a zoom in of the garden level condition as it is today. So, you can see that, I'll say that previously this was a multifamily rental building. We are restoring it to a single family residence. So the primary entry for the building right now is over here on the left at the garden. And then on the right side, sort of below where the stoop used to be, is another entrance to a studio beyond that has been, closed off and is no longer used as such. So of the 3 openings that were originally at the garden level, 2 have been modified into a door condition. And this center window has a bit of a stone sill here, which we are proposing modifying. You can also see the existing areaway. We got a couple of photos up here. It's in pretty rough condition and doesn't correspond with the 1940s tax photos either. There's a sort of elevated planter and then 2 steps down to the garden level. Our proposal, so this is just a facade of our proposal. So you can see here that what we are proposing is basically like unifying the sills at each of the 3 openings at the parlor level, each of the headers as well. So you can see the interior of the space is going to be a primary living room of the house. So, in keeping with the rest of the block, we want to create this condition where the openings are very uniform, but we do want to protect all the original door enfraimment details, so that stays put. And then in order to bring some of the traditional stonework that you typically see at an entry condition, a primary entry condition, we are just borrowing from elements that are already on the building and introducing them at the garden level. So some of that is just, some sort of filigree in the stone, and then also a sort of faux stone transom over the door. So just to jump back to the previous slide. So this element here, this sill at the center window at the garden, is another element that we're proposing, making uniform with its neighbors at the garden level. So here's a proposed front areaway. Given that we are restoring this to a single family property, we are proposing just unifying the stair. So there's a single stair down to the garden level with bluestone pavers and a brownstone retaining wall to match the facade. So here are just some of the some of the detail work that we're proposing, borrowing from the existing enfraimment at this parlor level window, and how that sort of gets translated to the garden level. We're also introducing new entry doors for the primary entrance, and historically, and also most of the townhouses on the block have 2 single panel storm doors, so we are borrowing that language for our primary wood doors. All right, so now moving back to the rear. So, I guess the opening that we are, proposing back here is, most of these are punched openings, but there are 2 window openings that we're proposing kind of turning at an L at the corner of the extension at the rear. So there's still a substantial column to either side of it. It's just that at the corner they will be joining. So you can kind of see it up here at the this kind of parlor level terrace. Here are some photos of the existing conditions at the rear. Some photos of just the donut at the back. It's quite enclosed. And here are just some photos of the existing conditions, drawing of the existing conditions, and then our proposed design. I believe that
Okay,
is it. So I'll just leave it on this page.
great. Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions right now, so why don't we see if there's public testimony, and we'll come back to you after that. So if you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony.
All right, thank you. So Sean Corsandi from Landmark West, you should be receiving a request from me now. Okay, Sean, I see you have accepted my request. You can go ahead and just please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Sasha. Good afternoon, Commissioner Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee is excited to see an applicant willing to replace row house windows in their original intended materials, wood, proving that where there's a will, there is a way. Although there's no return stoop proposed under this scope of work, the applicant's efforts to regularize the double hung windows are appreciated, and the design as a solution for the former parlor level entry is a well-considered compromise that suits the altered facade. While we would prefer the basement level sills to return to their keyhole masonry and framents, the current solution is still an improvement over the existing conditions, and there, as are the true new entry doors. Similarly, on the rear facade, the proposed alterations still respect the dog-leg form, which allow the landmark to adapt to modern living without obliterating the history in the process. Nothing outlined in the scope precludes further future restorative work. Our committee recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina Conroy, should be receiving a request from me now from the Victorian Society of New York. Okay, Christina, you can go ahead. Please just unmute your mic and state your name for the record.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy, again, for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, the VSNY supports most of the proposed work, including the removal of a modern door and side panel at the areaway entrance, all the non-historic window sash, and the central mullion bar, which was installed to create paired windows on floors 1, 3, and 4. We also support the removal of fragments of the original parlor entrance, including the brownstone lintel and transom, finding that eliminating these modest elements allows the creation of a more balanced facade. And we have no concern about the demolition of the existing modern rooftop addition and the removal of a moderate amount of the historic masonry on the rear facade to create large window openings which still maintain the domestic scale. However, we find that the presentation doesn't give adequate information on 2 important parts of the proposal. On the areaway level, the applicant is proposing to enlarge 2 window openings and install new sash and window grills. There is no proposed window section, but it appears that the sills are only inches above the areaway paving. Now, Commissioners, bottom rails of either wood or metal facing a sunken areaway just above the paving where snow and ice accumulate will rot. The photos on board LPC 11 show the existing belt course, which forms an integral sill below the central areaway window. This sill should be retained or recreated at the 2 windows. Doing so will also preserve the proportions of the rounded horseshoe arch openings. Now, finally, we are uneasy because we see from the notes that there is to be a new rooftop addition, but there is no roof plan showing the proposed footprint of this addition or sections showing the way the addition is to set back from the existing facades, or even a note that it will be reviewed at staff level. There should be explanations for changes shown on the presentation materials. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that we have Michelle Parker from Manhattan Community Board 7 with us. So let me just, Michelle, you should be receiving a request from me. Okay, Michelle, please just unmute your mic and state your name for the record.
Oops. Thank you, Michelle Parker, Community Board 7, Manhattan. Thank you, commissioners. The Community Board 7 approved this application as for the proposed changes to the front and rear facades as reasonably appropriate to the character of the historic district. And we made one recommendation that the rear yard be covered in permeable surface or semi-permeable pavers. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Arbalou from Historic District Council. I've just sent you a request. Okay, Michelle, please just unmute your mic and state your name for the record.
Hello, Michelle Arbalou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC appreciates and applauds the overall direction of this application. We do believe, though, that the proportions of the front door relative to the transom within the enfranchisement are awkward. Similarly, we believe the windows on the garden floor to the front of the entry should have their sills restored to the original height. We ask that the applicant work with LPC to refine these elements. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let me just take a glance back over. And I do not see any more hands raised. So there is no one else who wishes to speak on this item. And we already had Manhattan Community Board 7 read us their resolution onto the record. So I'll just turn it back over to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. McKenzie, would you like to respond to the comments that we've heard? I know Landmarks West supported the application, as did Community Board 7, but Community Board 7 did ask about the surface treatment and whether a permeable surface or semi-permeable pavers could be used in the rear. And then we heard comments on particularly the basement window details.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, so to address the comment about the penthouse, this is something that is being reviewed at staff level. The current penthouse is visible from the public right-of-way, and the proposed design eliminates any visibility. So staff is handling that. For the windowsills at the garden level, we are open to your feedback, and if the verdict is that it will create a better design to raise the sills, we're very much open to that. I think, storm waterproofing issues are something that would be addressed regardless. So I don't know that that's necessarily a concern for us. But from a preservation standpoint, we are somewhat flexible, and that is a entry mudroom, if you will, that doesn't have a lot of programmatic constraints pushing against it from the other side. Let's see. And then the front door, the proposed front door is actually, our proposal is just using the existing opening. And the transom proportion is, a nod to what was originally at the parlor level, or what's currently there, I should say. So, we could make modifications to the proportion of the door opening itself, but that would require maybe more modification to the original stonework. Yeah, there we go. So, we got a comment in the community board meetings about, why couldn't that be glass, for instance? And it's a little bit misleading from these elevations, but the ceiling of that garden level is actually right above that door. So we're a little bit boxed in there. And then, yeah, so we also, heard the note from the community board about the pavers at the rear. What they saw was, I guess, a work in progress sort of placeholder design for scope that's actually not in the project yet. So what they saw is not necessarily proposed design. It's just a sort of budgetary placeholder. But we will very much take their concerns into consideration whenever the garden becomes in scope.
Great, thank you. And I'll note that the paving at the rear yard is something that is likely to be reviewed at staff level, but it'd be great if you thought about the community board's concerns about the paving. Okay, and commissioners, any final questions? All right, I'm starting to send you all requests to unmute, so please accept those. All right, and Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And there are changes at the front facade and then modification of a window opening at the non-visible rear L and rear facade. And at the front, looking at replacing the window at the parlor floor to be the same configuration as the other windows, a new door with transoms and new window openings at the basement level. And then again at the back, enlarging that window opening. So let's begin our discussion. Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think our scope of review here is seems to be substantially more limited than what was in the presentation and what the comments were in the testimony. I don't really have any issues with any part of the work on the front facade. I heard the concern about the lowering of those windows, and I guess the applicant is willing to adjust that. I know there's some concern about removing that the transom on the parlor floor window. However, I am not. I'm not concerned about the removal of any original material there either. So I'm okay with this as it is.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
I feel the same way. I understand that there might be concern about that transom window, but I actually think that what they're doing to the columns or the pilasters on the kind of around the front entryway really kind of establishes or receives the weight of the upper pilasters. So I think it reads well, and I think that converting it to a single window that's like the two windows next to it makes sense, given what they've done on the ground floor. So I can approve it as presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Well, in general, I think it's a good application, but I do have some comments. I think that stone transom is an important element. It's very prominent on the block, and I think that it should be retained. But I do applaud what they're doing at the ground level for this new entry. I also agree that the sills for the lower level windows should be raised to the original sill height. And I have no issues with what they're doing in the back.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
I think in general, it's a good application. I think that the doors and the door surrounds generally are appropriate. The realignment of the sills, changes to the parlor windows and the areaway windows and surrounds. I'll support the suggestions of other commissioners that the window sills at the garden level be raised. But I think otherwise, I'm comfortable with the application as presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I think I'm with Ann on this. I think that transom bar is an important element. And I think that in their desire to make the house uniform from the interior, it's in a way trying to, I think, take away that layer of history that is an important element of how brownstones developed in New York City, where the entrances, by virtue of the asymmetry of the facade and the prominent cantilever to overhang, I think that they really do kind of want to remain different So I'm sure that the architect can come up with something that would be aesthetically acceptable on the interior while maintaining that stone transom. I think the other aspects of the design are quite lovely, actually, and totally appropriate. I think it's a good suggestion to consider raising the sills on the basement level windows. But it reminds me of this job that we saw here a few months ago, some restaurant in Brooklyn with I think it was a French architect who was doing all kinds of kind of non-practical things. It's not really, I don't think it's really smart to do the windows on the floor, but I think it's okay. I think it's appropriate. And I think the back facade changes are totally fine.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, actually, I agree with the comments, and I think it is the transom and the sill detail. I would defer to the majority to see how you want to recommend it.
Okay, Commissioner Bland?
Unmute there. So often we look at stoop replacements, but rarely, I think, do we look at fixing up what was poorly done when the stoop was removed, usually in the 40s. And I think this is a good example of how to kind of repair better than was done initially, when the stoop was removed and not replacing it. So I support it as it's been drawn in all aspects, both the front and the back. I think it's all good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
I think the applicant has done a good job on this project. I'm fine with the idea of removing the transom and having there be uniformity in terms of the windows on the parlor floor. If the majority of the commissioners think that the sills should be raised at the garden level, I'll support that, but I'm actually fine with it the way it is. And I think the back also works.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I was torn by the stone stone transom at one point, but then I thought, look, they took the stoop out, and to keep it didn't make any sense. And what they did was to kind of regulate it into a very nice parlor floor. So I think what they have is consistent, and I like it. I think the back facade is fine. I think the fence is fine. I think the whole proposal is fine.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I similarly think that this is a very nice proposal. And I also have been sort of on the fence about the stone transom bar and thinking about it. And I think, like Commissioner Jefferson, I sort of feel that, with the stoop being removed, that it does tell the story that this was the door, but I think that the door surround and the pilasters actually do that in a much more prominent way, and that it's very common to see in cases historically when stoops were removed for a window to be added that matched the other windows. So I think removing it in itself doesn't diminish the history of this opening and allows for a consistent fenestration pattern that might have been the case and was the case in many other buildings that were historically altered over time with the removal of the stoop. So I would go with that. So I think that actually gives us a majority on the door. With respect to the windows at the ground floor, I think we also have a majority of being fine with the size of the window openings. And I think that they're not changing the window size of the window opening. So actually asking them to raise them may be out of scope. But we certainly will ask them to continue to work with the staff on any waterproofing details and ensuring that it's sound quality construction there. So I think we can go ahead and approve it, and I think we may have enough to vote for it as is. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you go ahead and make the motion?
In the matter of docket number LPC 22-06483, 51 West 70th Street in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. The application is to alter the front facade and areaway, install ironwork, and modify window openings. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. I also note that the stoop was removed and the main entrance was relocated to the basement level prior to about 1940, as shown in the historic tax photograph. I recommend approval, finding that the building is at the end of the road, is adjacent to another highly altered building with a ground floor entrance, and that the front areaway was previously modified when the stoop was removed. Therefore, the proposed work will not diminish the unity of the row. That the proposed areaway fence featuring ironwork on a stucco curb will be simply designed and consistent with the ironwork found throughout the block and the historic district in terms of placement, materials, details, and finish. That lowering the sill at the central ground floor window opening will be barely perceptible from the sidewalk level due to its location in the sunken area way below grade. That the proposed modern ironwork at the ground floor windows will not call undue attention to itself, given the variety of window grills found throughout the historic district on houses of this age and style. That the proposed ornamental pilasters at the ground floor will reflect the existing detail above and enhance the formality of the main entrance. That the proposed paired doors featuring solid wood panels with a stained finish will be harmonious with the doors at other buildings in this row and with buildings of a similar age, type, and style. That the enlargement of masonry openings at the rear facade will not be visible from a public thoroughfare. That the proposed enlargements will not remove the full width of the rear wall or side wall of the rear extension and will not diminish the predominance of solidity at the rear facade, and the rear facade will retain a residential scale. And that the work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building or the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. I also recommend, we recommend that that the applicant work closely with staff with regard to the materials and waterproofing and future condition of the sills at the lower level, with the possibility of raising those if they so desire.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Nay.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Nay.
With 8 in favor and 2 opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next and final item.
And that is public hearing item number 6, LPC 21-00153, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1916, lot 16, 137 West 131st Street in the Central Harlem, West 130 to 132nd Street Historic District. Currently an empty lot, formerly occupied by a neo-Grec style row house designed by Clebern and Putzel and built in 1885 and demolished between 1940 and 1980. The application is to construct a new building.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Milad, you now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
And then you can state your name for the record and you may begin.
My name is Milad Saburi. I'm here at behalf of the owner, Mr. Ahmed Amjad from Sium Consulting. And here with me, I have Danny Yan, and he will join us if needed. So we are proposing new building on the vacant lot. This lot, the previous building was built in 1885 and was demolished sometime between 1940s and 1980s, and since then it was vacant lot. So for proposing a new building on this vacant lot, we considering to look into the history, and we came to the conclusion that we can use the building 140 West as an example for the old building and replicate the old building and use that building as an example. So in the first page, you would see the axonometric view of the neighborhood. We have the tax photos that's showing the old building, and we have the proposed new facade. In this page, we have the zoning calculation and site plan, and in the top left side, left corner, you can see the building and where the building is sitting on the historical district. In this slide, we have some photos from the outside showing the neighborhood and adjacent building. In this slide, we have the view from the back and rear facade of the adjacent building. So here we're trying to show what is how is the extension look like in the neighborhood. And obvious, the darker color means more extension and more additional. Some 3D view to showing the mass of the building. I need to mention that from the basement, first floor, and the second floor, we are extending our building nearly 10 feet. But for the third floor, we are aligned to the adjacent building, and we have the penthouse that sitting 3 feet back from the adjacent building. We have a floor plan. We have the section, as I said, basement, first floor, second floor, we are extending. Third floor, we are matching with the adjacent building, and the penthouse, we are sitting back for 3 feet. Some views to show the stoops and the details and the cornice and the facade elements. Of course, we look into the history, we look into the old photos, and we are trying to match all the elements, like regarding to the new post, railings, these kind of things. We are trying to match the old building. Here we are showing the view from the public and the penthouse sitting back 10 feet and is not visible from the public. And in the bottom right side, you can see the front facade color theme and the rear facade color themes. We are using the real stucco, real stucco, and we are choosing to have the facade matching the adjacent building. Building at 141. It's a brownstone color. In the rear facade, we have a tan color, and for the cornice and the windows frame, we are choosing to have a black. And basically we're choosing this color because when we look into the adjacent building, we see some pattern that the building they have. They are in the harmony with each other, but they have some identity. So I saw that the next adjacent building we had, the cornice was like on the brighter side of the color, and then we choose to have a black, and that's almost matching the 141 building. Here another view for the stoop. We have a gate, that's a raw iron gate, and newel post and other elements. Another view to show that how the building it was seen from the public. That's this 3D view we provided to show that the setback, it's 10 feet setback, is not visible from the public. Here in the top left corner side, we have the photos. Sometime between, I think it was before the 1940s, and we have 1980s that showing that the lot is vacant, and the current situation that we have. and material and all the notes that regarding to the material and all the elements of the facade. Now how the building is sitting to the next to the adjacent building and how it look like, the facade elements, we're trying to align all the elements with the adjacent building. These are some important elements for the facade: newel post and railing, and the cornice and molding, stucco molding, and it will be the cornice in the top. And this is almost what we have, and I will hand over the meeting to you guys if you have any questions.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, not seeing any questions. Let's see if there's public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Sasha Sealy to take us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you. Michelle Arbalou from Historic District Council. You should be receiving a request from me now. Okay, Michelle, please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, Michelle Arbalou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC is generally comfortable with this proposal, but we find 2 items to be in need of modification. First, the proposed windows should be aluminum-clad wood windows. These will provide a finer detailing more appropriate to a house of this scale. Second, we question the need for a bulkhead on top of the rooftop extension. We believe the code does not require this bulkhead and that the requirement for the rooftop access could be accomplished with a steel ladder on the front of the extension. We ask that the applicant verify this understanding, as the bulkhead adds an awkward element to an already excessive protrusion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, John Graham from Victorian Society, New York. John, you should receive a request from me now. Okay, John, I see you've accepted my request. Please just unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. The Victorian Society enthusiastically supports this proposed new building with its neo-Greek style brownstone stucco facade. The highly uniform nature of this row of brownstones calls out for the missing building to be replaced to match its neighbors, including the one at number 141 that apparently was its exact match. Any other design would call attention to itself and destroy the intended uniformity of this row. The proposed details should be faithful to the original building in the row, as it appears to be the intent. We suggest that the cornice match the color of the brownstone, as we believe that was the historic practice. Thank you very much, Commissioners.
All right, thank you. Let me just take a glance back over at the attendees and see if there's anyone else that wishes to speak on this item. Okay, and I do not see any more hands raised, so I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 10 recommends approval of this application, and we also received a letter of support from the 131st Street Block Association. And I will turn it back over to you, Chair Carroll.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sasha. Okay, I'd like to turn back to the applicant, and we've heard largely supportive testimony, but there were a couple of questions about some of the details, and so I wanted to see if you would like to respond to any of those.
Regarding the bulkhead, I think it's not feasible from the public, but I don't know why they have objection regarding that.
For the new building, any new buildings more than 3-story, we need to have access to the roof, but not to the ladders. So that's a requirement of a New York City building code.
Regarding the cornice color, I think because the adjacent building they have too bright color, that's why we're choosing black. So we are in the harmony with the windows frame. So I think taking as a facade to be brown and then the window frame and the cornice should be black, I think it's visually more pleasant, and we will be in the harmony with the adjacent building, but we will present the building, as a, one, identity. I think the black can work with that one. That's my opinion. So I don't know.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I think as I understand it, the bulkhead is not visible from a public way, but is also required because this is all a new building. It's not just an addition on an existing building. And I had heard your comments about the black cornice, and I would just say that, we know from experience that row houses, brownstone row houses were historically built with cornices that were painted to match the stone. However, we also know from experience that early on in the mid 20th century and beyond, many of them were painted black with darker colors over time. And so that is why you do see the use of black throughout the other row houses in the district. Okay, commissioners, any final questions? Okay, I'm going to start sending you requests so that we can unmute and begin our discussion. And Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, excuse me. So the hearing is closed and we will begin our discussion on a new building in this recently designated historic district that is using really its rest of its row as its model to sort of recreate or largely recreate the building that once existed on this lot, but with a different massing at the top and at the back, and with different materials, and as it's a new building that's going to be using stucco instead of brownstone. So Commissioner Holford Smith, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think in general, this is a very good application. It looks like they've paid a lot of attention to details. And I think using the existing buildings as reference is appropriate. I think, as testimony said, that putting something different here would probably stand out more than we would care for it to do. So I think doing a replicative design is appropriate. I would just ask that they work carefully with the staff on the details and on the colors, because I think black, I understand that their desire to do black for the windows as well, which may not have been an historic color. So I think that that should be worked with at staff level. And I think I also agree that just because you're seeing the building fairly close up, that a wood clad window would be more appropriate than the aluminum in this case for the small residential building.
Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I think I agree with, really all of Commissioner Holford Smith's comments. It is a nice application, and the color palette and details should be worked with the staff. And I agree that probably the windows would not have been dark, but or at least not a black, and so they should work on that. The cornice could be black or dark gray or something. And I think in general, I agree. I think it's fine, and it's a good proposal.
Okay, and just on the, on the row, which is the rest of the row on which they're basing their details is a, excuse me, is a late 19th century row. And so I think we do know from experience that the colors of the windows and doors would have been in the darker range. The general sort of rule of thumb is that they get darker as you move through the 19th century. So, but I think we can definitely have them work with the staff to refine and make sure that we're being consistent with the age and style of the buildings it's trying to replicate. Commissioner Goldblum?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. I think it's a totally acceptable proposal. I think that, of course, the the details are critical, and yeah, and the applicant should work with staff on that. And I agree with Ann about the windows. They should be the wood clad, the metal clad wood.
Yeah.
Great. Commissioner Chen?
I agree with most of the comments, especially the one from Ann. I think they should work with the staff, and the wood clad windows will be nice.
Commissioner Bland?
No disagreement here either. I just will note again, for emphasis, that to get these details right, and you have examples on either side of you, so it should be relatively easy to do so. But building a new brownstone 150 years later with different kinds of labor still may be a challenge. So even 1 or 2% off is going to be way off. So again, staff is going to be, I hope, monitoring this thing very closely to be sure that the concept, which is beautiful, ends up being what we see in reality when the building is finished. But I think this is very, very well done, and I look forward to seeing this missing tooth filled in pretty soon.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
I agree. I think it's a very successful application. I applaud the applicant for their attention to detail. I happen to agree that the windows should be wood-clad aluminum.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
This is what I call a very good neighbor proposal. I can approve it.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate. I agree with the comments about the material for the windows, and it's a fine project.
And Commissioner Shamir Baron?
I always find these conditions to be so interesting, and I'm always just a little bit sad when they get filled in, because they give us a kind of a glimpse into the inside of these blocks, and these kind of skinny missing teeth have an interesting, volumetric form and feeling on the street. But that's a side matter. From that the application is well done, and I agree with Commissioner Jefferson. It is neighborly and respectful, and I do agree about the windows, that they should be aluminum clad wood, metal clad wood.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think we agree that in general this is an appropriate insertion in this historic district, but I think we agree that they should work with the staff to revise the windows to be aluminum clad wood windows instead of aluminum, and that they work closely with the staff on the final color selection and details. So Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make that motion?
Yes. In the matter of LPC 21-00153, 137 West 131st Street, Central Harlem, West 132nd Street, Historic District. An empty lot formerly occupied by a neo-Grec style row house designed by Cleverdon and Putzel and built in 1885 and demolished between circa 1940 and 1980. Application is to construct a new building. I recommend approval with some modifications, finding that the construction of a new building at this vacant lot will restore the continuity of the street wall and fill the gap in the row, that the new building will maintain the massing of the original row house that was present on this lot and will be consistent with the adjacent row houses, but will incorporate a setback rooftop addition and rear yard extension that will not overwhelm its height and scale and will not be visible from public thoroughfares. That the proposed two-bay fenestration, entrance, surround, and details, and overall proportions will match that of the demolished historic row house by copying existing elements at number 141, which are consistent with the former row house's historic conditions. That the design and proportions of the stucco-clad facade and stoop, scored and carved to replicate the appearance of brownstone with neo-Grec style detailing and punched masonry openings with 1/1 double-hung windows, will closely replicate aspects of neighboring historic buildings. That the proposed fiberglass cornice will match the historic cornice in terms of scale, profile, details, and finish, and will align with existing cornices at the adjacent row houses. That the basic areaway components, including ironwork and paving, and the areaway grade will be in keeping with elements typically found at areaways on this row and throughout this historic district. That the rear yard extension and rear facade will not be visible from any public thoroughfare. That the rear of the building will be simply designed and feature a solid to void ratio, use of punched masonry openings, materials and finishes, which will be in keeping with such aspects of typical rear facades at buildings within the streetscape and historic district, thereby helping the rear facade to be harmonious with this context. That the tan color of the cementitious stucco on the rear facade is in keeping with the materials and color palette of other houses on the block. That the depth of the building will not substantially eliminate the presence of a rear yard, and that the proposed new building will enhance the special architectural and historic character of the Central Harlem West 132nd Street Historic District. But I find that the applicant should work with staff to make sure that the details and colors are appropriate to the style of the building, and that the windows be metal-clad wood windows instead of aluminum.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
I'm sorry?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
He might be muted.
Commissioner Jefferson, I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry for that. Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you and good luck. And please continue to work with the staff. So that concludes our public hearing and public meeting today. Thank you to the public who participated today and always inform our work here. And thank you, as always, to you commissioners for your dedication and your commitment to everything that we do. We are not having a hearing next week, so we will see everyone again on April 26th. Take care.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice holidays, everyone.
Yeah, likewise, yeah.